of a dog protest, but they're both sitting right in front of my firelight. Henwolf is grooming Chicano. You can hear it, maybe a little bit, and Chicano's pawing at me. So the dogs have decided that I have to give them more attention right now. But I mean, I can't really help you guys. I'm sorry, puppies. I love you. I'll give you treats in a little bit. But we got to read some more scary stories. So come on, Chicano. Come here. Come here, buddy. Why don't you come over here and lay down? Sorry, guys. Animal wrangling. Come on, buddy. It's okay. Go lay down there. There we go. Now I have some light on my face. At least a little bit. And how's everybody doing? Everybody doing pretty good? Let's see. David Denoyer said, sitting fireside, ready AF. Rebecca Randolph said, woohoo. Tony Jett said, I'm here, and I'm on time. Well, I appreciate that. Craig Cohen's in the chat. Oh, and thank you, Craig, for being our first tip of the evening. Craig is our overachiever, and he tips before the show even starts. That's how hard it'll be to beat him at getting the first tip. Ray Cersei said, bursts in like the Kool-Aid man. Oh, yeah. Made it. Craig said, hello, good evening, Henrik. Good evening, my friend. I hope you are very well. I hope everybody who is tuning in right now is well, is safe, and is ready to kick back by the fire for some scary stories. Because if you were here last week, you know that we started Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 9. This is the final book in the Scary Stories for Sleepovers. Now, we have not been reading them in order, so we have like 6 other books we can read, but this was the final one published in the late 90s, and as many of you probably remember from last week, it is quite different from some of the other books. It is a little bit weirder, a little bit less predictable, and a whole lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to us reading the next story from here in just a moment. I see we have Jason P. Weinrub. He said, I'm doing well. Good to hear. My buddy Keith is in here. Good to see you, Keith. Good to see you, Ron. Dwayne Whitaker's popped in for a second. Dwayne, if you're watching, thank you so much for visiting for a second. Ron Lynch said, just made it in time after a 3-mile dog walk. Well, it's good to get your exercise in, but now it's time to get your spookies in. So I'm going to read this story, and then I'll hang out in the chat with you guys for a little bit, and then we'll read another one. And remember, tipping is not required, it is not mandatory, but it is hugely appreciated. I am working not as much as I would like during this whole epidemic, and I'm waiting on checks, and it's making me crazy and a little cranky. But anyway, let's read the first story. This story is called Night Terrors. I just realized I forgot to tie my beard into beard ties. I am such a mess. I'm so sorry. I am such a mess. This is the only thing I have to do like on time. And I had one job and it was to look presentable and I... Anyway, if I hadn't said anything, I bet nobody would have noticed. I'm my own worst enemy. All right. This story is called Night Terrors. No! Stay away from me! Help! 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 Doug Snow bolted upright in his bed. His attention turned immediately to his bedside clock. The glowing numbers read 11:57 p.m. Dazed and disoriented, Doug slid out from underneath his covers. His heart pounding in his ears, he stumbled toward his bedroom door. Although the screams that had jarred him from his sleep now seemed like nothing more than the echoes of a bad dream, he knew that they had come from the adjacent bedroom. They were his father's. The man was in danger. Perhaps he was fighting for his life. Still too confused to fear for his own safety, Doug stumbled into the main hallway of his family's one-story ranch-style home and snapped on the light. He could hear the faint movement from his parents' bedroom, which stood at the end of the corridor. The door was wide open. "Dad?" Doug called out. "Dad, are you all right?" A figure immediately appeared in the bedroom doorway. It was his mother, a dark-haired woman of medium height who was dressed in pajamas and a familiar yellow terry cloth robe. Adjusting her plastic-rimmed glasses, she gave Doug a warm smile. "It's all right, Doug," she assured him, her voice soft and soothing. "Go back to bed." "But I heard Dad scream," Doug insisted. "He was having a nightmare, that's all," his mother explained. "He's fine now. It's late. You need your sleep." "Okay," Doug said with a sigh. Turning back, he saw his younger sister, Lainey, leaning against her bedroom door frame. "What's going on?" the 9-year-old asked. "Dad had a bad dream," Doug said, assuming an air of authority. "Go back to bed." With that, he snapped off the hallway light. Almost in unison, the 3-bedroom doors closed shut. Silence once again settled upon the snow house. It was exactly midnight. "How come you screamed last night?" Doug asked his father the next morning at breakfast. Doug's dad, who was wearing a well-tailored blue pinstriped business suit and a colorful Italian knit silk tie, nervously ran his hand over his nearly bald head and cleared his throat. "Actually, I thought your mother was a burglar," his father admitted. "I stayed up late to watch one of the talk shows," his mother explained. "When I walked into the bedroom, it scared your father." "Daddy's a scaredy cat, Daddy's a scaredy cat," Lainey chanted tauntingly. "Don't make fun of your father," her mother scolded. "You've had a few bad dreams yourself, as I recall." Doug studied his father's face. The man seemed unusually tense this morning. There were dark bags under his eyes, and when he lifted his coffee mug, Doug could see his hand shaking ever so slightly. Doug began to suspect more was going on here than just a bad dream. But he decided it was best not to press the matter. Not yet, anyway. "No! Stop! Help! Ah!" Doug's eyes snapped open. He was staring directly at his bedside digital clock. The time was 11:48. Listening carefully, he heard faint voices coming from the room next door, his parents' bedroom. The voices sounded frightened, upset. Fully alert, Doug climbed out of bed, slipped on his leather house slippers, and padded over to his bedroom door. Peering down the corridor, he could see a faint light coming from the far side of his parents' bedroom door, which was only partially closed. Curious, he hurried to the door and whispered, "Dad? Mom? Are you all right?" "We're fine, Doug," his mother replied. "Your father had another bad dream, that's all. Go back to bed. We'll see you in the morning." "You sure he's okay?" Doug inquired. "I'm fine," his father assured him. "Now please, just leave me alone." Doug turned back to his room. It had been 3 days since his father's first nocturnal scream fest. Every night since, his dad had woken up just before midnight screaming his head off. It didn't matter if his mom went back to bed at the same time his dad did or not. Like clockwork, the nightmares came. And they were driving Doug crazy. These midnight cries weren't just mild grunts or moans. They were the loud, blood-curdling shrieks of a man who was truly screaming for his life. It didn't matter if they were just triggered by dreams. Doug's dad's nightmares were going to give him nightmares, and he wanted them to stop right now. "Are you having a hard time at work?" Doug asked his father the next morning, as the older man prepared to leave for the office. Doug was referring to his father's job as a senior project manager for a major semiconductor manufacturing company. "Not especially," his dad replied as he checked the contents of his leather briefcase. "We've been under a lot of pressure to finish our latest chip prototype, but we've still got plenty of time." "Why?" "Well, I once read that stress can cause nightmares, and I thought maybe that's why you've been having these bad dreams," Doug explained. "I appreciate your concern," his father said with a warm smile. "But these things go in cycles. I've had them before, don't you remember?" "No," Doug replied in surprise. "When was that?" "When you were about 3 or 4, his dad said. "Actually, I've had bad dreams ever since I was a kid. I even sleepwalked when I was a teenager. It was just how I'm built, I guess. Some people get ulcers, some people get migraine headaches. I scream in my sleep." "Isn't there anything you can do about it?" Doug asked. "Can't the doctor give you pills or something?" "I don't want to take any medications," his father insisted. "I'm sure this phase will pass just like the others. I'm just sorry my nightmares disturb you and your sister." "Me too," Doug said. "They're creepy." "You ought to see them from my side," his father said wearily. The bedside clock read 11:53 p.m. Lying awake, his nerves on edge, Doug watched as the numbers changed to 11:54. Although he'd gone to bed over an hour ago, he couldn't sleep. He knew his father was going to scream again, and just knowing that any minute now the house would be filled with those horrific cries was enough to keep all of his nerves on edge. No! Stop! Ah! Ah! Right on cue, his father's screams shattered the night's silence. But this time, they were joined by another set of cries. His mother's. "Stop it!" he heard his mother shout. "Stop it! Don't touch me! No!" Sensing that something was seriously amiss, Doug bolted out of bed and ran straight to his parents' bedroom. In the dim ambient light, he could see his mom and dad sitting up in bed, their heads bowed and breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" Doug asked, concerned. "Mom, I heard you screaming." His mother reached over and turned on her bedside lamp. At first, the light hurt Doug's eyes, but as they adjusted, he could see a large red welt forming near his mom's right eye. "What happened to you?" Doug gasped in shock. "I'm so sorry," his father whispered, his voice shaking. I thought you were someone else." "Did Dad hit you?" Doug asked in disbelief. His sister Lainey was now at his side. She too was shocked by the sight of their wounded mother. "He was having another nightmare," their mother explained. "He started swinging his arms. I tried to stop him, and that's when he hit me in the eye." "I dreamed that people were chasing me," Doug's father stated. "I was trying to run away, but my legs wouldn't move. I had to fight back any way I could." "I really think you should see a doctor about this," Doug said seriously, "before you hurt Mom again." "I agree," Doug's mother said. His dad bowed his head sheepishly. "Maybe you're right," he admitted. "Good," Lainey said. "Then maybe we can all get some sleep around here." The pills Doug's dad came home with the next day were prescription drugs designed to put the user into a deep, dreamless sleep. The doctor says he's given these to other nightmare sufferers, and the success rate has been about 80%, he told the family over dinner. "What about the other 20%? Doug asked skeptically. "I guess they still get nightmares," his dad said with a shrug. "But even if I still do have bad dreams, maybe I won't move as much." "Or scream?" Lainey asked hopefully. "Or scream," her dad replied with a smile. "Well, I guess this means we'll all sleep a little easier tonight," their mother said. "I hope so," Doug said. He was looking forward to a long, uneventful night. Arr! 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 The screams coming from the room next door barely sounded human. They sounded more like the roars of a lion or an angry bear. "No! Stop!" came another set of cries. Doug immediately recognized them as his mother's. "I guess the pills didn't work," Doug said to himself. He imagined his dad once again flailing about in bed, striking out at enemies that existed only in his dreaming mind. Crash! Something shattered in his parents' bedroom. It sounded like a lamp. Another sharp crash followed a few seconds later, accompanied by his mother's wild, terrified screams. "What the heck is going on in there?" Doug thought. This sounded far worse than anything that had gone on before. Shaking from fear, Doug threw back his covers and hurried toward the source of the disturbance. "Mom!" he shouted as he raced down the hall. "Mom, are you okay?" Along the way, he flicked on the hall light, bathing the entire area with bright luminance. Reaching his parents' room, he pushed the door open wide, allowing the light from the hallway to spill through. What he saw caused him to stop, dead in his tracks. His dad was out of bed, on his feet, holding a golf club he'd grabbed out of the open walk-in closet. He was swinging the club wildly, his glassy eyes seemingly focused on something a million miles away. "Wake up!" Doug's mother shouted as she ducked behind her side of the bed. "Bert, please, wake up!" Crash! The framed picture hanging above their bed shattered as the golf club slammed into its protective glass. It took a moment, but Doug quickly realized that although the man's eyes were open, his father was still asleep. Apparently, the sleeping pills he'd taken had worked too well, keeping him unconscious when he'd otherwise have been awakened by his own violent actions. "Dad, wake up!" Doug shouted. "Put down the golf club!" His father turned away from the bed and stared at his son with cold, dead eyes. A moment later, his face twisted into an evil sneer, and raising his golf club high, he charged in his son's direction. "No!" Doug screamed, his arms held protectively over his head. He turned to run. He didn't see Lainey standing directly behind him. Brother and sister immediately collided and both tumbled painfully to the floor. "You won't get me!" their father shouted madly as he swung the golf club wildly through the air. Doug could feel the wind of the club's head passing as it whooshed no more than 6 inches from his head and slammed into the wall with an explosive bang, creating a deep dent in the painted plasterboard. Laney screamed as their father swung again, this time clipping the top of Doug's tangled hair. "Leave the children alone!" Doug heard his mother shout. Looking up, Doug saw his mom grab the golf club from behind her husband and attempt to wrestle it from his hands. His dad fought back like a maniac, still clearly in a dream state and totally unaware of what he was doing. "Stay here," Doug whispered to Laney. There wasn't much chance of his sister moving. At this point, she was completely paralyzed by fear. Hopping to his feet, Doug dashed into his bedroom. Looking about for a weapon, he grabbed the first heavy object he could lay his hands on. His piggy bank. Returning to the hallway, he found his mom and dad still locked in a struggle over possession of the potentially lethal golf club. "Dad, this is gonna hurt me more than it'll hurt you," Doug said, sucking in a deep breath. "Or maybe not." With that, he brought the ceramic bank down onto the back of his dad's head with a resounding crash. Quarters, dimes, and nickels went flying everywhere along with shards of painted, fired clay. Stunned by the impact, his father stood rock still for a moment. Then, like a felled pine tree, he swayed slightly and collapsed in a heap to the carpeted floor. Doug was surprised to see a slight smile frozen on his dad's unmoving lips. "No more sleeping pills," Doug's dad announced as he poured the rest of the prescription drugs into the toilet. Doug, his mother, and his sister Laney applauded as the man pushed the flush lever, sending the pills spinning into watery oblivion. He then rubbed the bruise on the back of his head, straightened his tie, and turned to his wife. "So," he said, "what's for breakfast?" Doug's bedside clock read 11:56 p.m. Doug lay on his back, breathing steadily, his muscles slowly relaxing. He was just beginning to drift off to sleep when he heard a terrifying scream emanating from the next room. "No! Ah! Help me!" his father screamed. This was immediately followed by a sharp slap as his mom woke the man from his nightly nightmare. This ritual had become so familiar that Doug had learned to count on it, and now found it as comforting as a goodnight kiss. Assured that he and his family were all safe and sound, Doug turned over in his bed, closed his eyes, and let himself fall into a calm, restful sleep. Man, this is the weirdest book of all of them so far. I like that story, but what a weird ending. Just twisted. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. All right, it's giving me a moment to load. All right, let's see. All right, you guys. Why is it not loading? Sorry, guys. The chat's giving me a little bit of trouble. I gotta get it loaded. Dwayne West, hello, my friend. Ready for my weekly spooky? Well, that's a different show, but this is some spooky that is weekly. So, Ray Cersei, no, not Mom 2, not the little girl. Tony Marr, man, what a way to join the stream. Dad, put down the golf club. Reminds me of my childhood. Woof. Ray Cersei, here we go again. Keith Tomlin, faking nightmare sounds like a good way to get away with murder. Michelle said, I did not expect that. Ray Cersei said, that was odd. I would agree. Kitty Lynn Wolf, nice. Tony Janot, LOL, he got used to the screaming. It's like getting used to the TV being on before bed. Ron Lynch said, that ending, LOL. I'm glad you guys enjoyed that one. That one was an unusual story, but I'm liking that that we've gotten such a varying degree of creepy and scary stories. That one was kind of oddly in the realm of reality. I mean, people have really bad nightmares that you don't understand, and sometimes the only solution is just a good. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Morgan Moore said, that was certainly a story. Rebecca Randolph said, that was wild. Oh, Shane Migliavacca just joined us. I want to mention Shane has a new story on my my adult scary story podcast, Weekly Spooky, which publishes every Wednesday. You can find out more at weeklyspooky.com. We did a story by Shane called The Dinner Guests, which I narrated, and it is a fun and tense one, so you should definitely check it out. And there are lots of other stories that Shane has written available at weeklyspooky.com. Tony Janot said, and no one died. David Denoyer, I have dreams about a guy who has knives for fingers. Sounds like something you made up. Fred Krueger is dead. Mommy killed him. Okay, so, but, I hope everybody's doing well. This is, I believe, our 8th. I think this might be the 8th. This is the 7th or 8th Weekly Spooky. We've been doing this for almost 2 months. And it's been a lot of fun. I hope it's made a lot of your guys' global pandemic a little bit more bearable. It definitely has helped mine. So, let's see. What say we do another story? And but remember, please hit the share button. Click that share button and let people know what you're doing with your Wednesday night and who you're hanging out with, and have a good time. Let them know that they should join us. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, tipping is appreciated, not mandatory, but it does kind of just help things along. That's how I ended up buying all of these books, Scary Stories for Sleepovers. I had to hunt them down across many Goodwill stores across the United States. Of course, on the internet. We got a couple more comments. Katie Lynn Wolf said, Weekly Spooky is how I start my Thursdays. Thank you. Tony Marr, so anthology series of these on Amazon next? I wouldn't be against it, but, I would love to do Scary Stories for Sleepovers, the series, but that's a whole other can of worms, getting all the rights and stuff together. So, Tony Janot said, I shared this stream into like 20 groups. Thank you, my friend. Sharing is caring, and sharing is scaring. All right. Before I say any more puns, let's start the next story, and then we can talk a little bit more, and you guys can all get to tipping. Okay, this story is called Faces. Crash! The explosive sound of shattering glass snapped Samantha Collier's concentration away from the homework on her desk and toward her bedroom window. There, she saw her blue and white striped curtains billowing ghost-like as a steady breeze whipped through the jagged hole in what had moments before been a pane of double-glazed glass. Countless transparent shards lay on the carpet beneath the window, glistening like diamonds, and in the center of the debris sat the cause of this mess. A scuffed Little League regulation baseball. Great, Samantha moaned as she rose from her chair. Brushing aside her long blonde hair, she carefully picked up the ball, dusted off several tiny bits of glass, then looked out through what remained of her bedroom window. In the fenced-in yard next door stood 2 fifth graders, Tommy Parker and Stuart Boggs. Tommy, the skinny one, was wearing a baseball glove. Stuart, who seemed to grow chubbier by the day, was holding a bat. Both were wearing expressions of extreme embarrassment. Hi there, Samantha, Stuart shouted up at the window, waving at her. Can we have our ball back? Tommy yelled. Samantha's reply was cut short by a flash of light, followed by a crash of thunder. Tommy and Stuart immediately bolted for the house, and a moment later, it began to rain. This should hold you until we can get the window replaced, Mr. Collier said as he tacked the plywood board into position. I know it doesn't look very pretty, but at least it'll keep the rain and bugs out. Thanks, Dad, said Samantha. She was sitting cross-legged on her four-poster bed, staring at the ugly plywood rectangle that now blocked out her room's only source of natural light. She suddenly felt that her room had become a dungeon, that the board had sealed her off from the outside world. How soon do you think I can get my window back? The repairman said he's pretty backed up right now, her dad replied. He said it will probably be about a week. I hope Tommy and Stuart are paying for this, Samantha said, her eyes now fixed on the wooden board. It was their baseball, you know. Oh, they're paying for it all right, her dad said with a knowing smile. Their parents are making sure of that. Good, said Samantha, Her parents had raised her to own up to her mistakes, and she hated to see other kids get away with not taking responsibility for their actions. Too bad they can't make the repairman come any faster. I know. It's a bummer, her father agreed. He looked at his daughter. Dinner should be about ready. Coming down? Mom's barbecuing chicken. In a few minutes, Samantha replied. I've still got some math homework to finish. Don't take too long, her dad said, heading to the door. You know how much work your mother puts into her Thursday night barbecues. Yes, Samantha knew all of her mom's barbecues. Although they could have easily afforded a propane grill, her mom always insisted on charcoal briquettes and mesquite wood chips. Sure, it takes longer, her mother always said, but it sure makes the meat taste a whole lot better. With the smell of barbecue already wafting through the air, Samantha climbed off her bed and walked over to the plywood that covered her window. Something about it had disturbed her the moment her father had brought it into her room. It wasn't just its inherent ugliness, and it wasn't the fact that it blocked her view of the world beyond. No, there was something else about this board, something creepy that she couldn't quite put her finger on. And then she saw them. At first, they looked like two ordinary knotholes, the kind found in just about any wooden plank. But as she looked closer, she realized that they weren't just knotholes. They were eyes. Stepping back, she saw that these eyes were framed by a series of lines and swirls that combined to form a nearly perfect face. A cat-like face. Above the eyes were a pair of angular whorls that became slanted eyebrows. Between the eyes was a ripple that doubled as a triangular nose. Below that was a twisted mouth and an even recognizable jawline. The arrangement of these features was too perfect to be just her imagination. It was as clear and distinct as the four faces on Mount Rushmore. Even more unsettling, the face seemed to be staring directly at Samantha. It seemed to know she was there, just as she could discern its presence within the wood. Dad! Samantha shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Dad, come here right now! I set off the dogs. Come here right now! She immediately regretted summoning her dad. She knew exactly what he was going to say. For this wasn't the first time Samantha Collier had seen a face where a face didn't belong. For as long as she could remember, she'd seen faces staring at her from the oddest places. From the ceiling, from the wallpaper, from the clouds. To most people, these faces that Samantha saw were nothing more than random patterns of shapes and shades found in everyday objects. They were just dots in acoustical ceiling squares, flecks of black in a linoleum tile floor, or the natural lines and swirls found in a wooden desktop. But Samantha knew better. These faces were real. They represented life forms that other people, through blindness or a simple refusal to believe, failed to see. When Samantha was a child, she would often cry in terror when one of these faces suddenly appeared to her out of a bathroom floor or from within a billowing cloud. Now, in middle school, she usually kept these sightings to herself, but this one was different. It was so obvious and so disturbing that she couldn't stay silent. What is it, darling? Her father asked as he stepped back into her room. What's wrong? Look at this board, Samantha said, pointing at the image with her voice trembling. Do you see it? Do I see what? Her dad inquired, moving to his daughter's side. The face, Samantha said. There's a face in the wood. Her father examined the wood from one angle, then another. He shrugged his shoulders innocently. Sorry, honey, he said. I just see a piece of wood. And you know why? Because that's all it is. A piece of wood. Your mind's playing tricks on you again. She knew her dad would say this. Her dad always said this. Why couldn't he see something so obvious? But it's there, Samantha insisted, pointing to the board. See, there are the eyes and the nose and the mouth. I've told you before, it's an optical illusion. her father explained. The human brain likes familiar patterns, and one of the first things we come to recognize as babies are faces. So when we see something that even remotely has a symmetrical design, we tend to put a human face on it. Some people see faces in ink blots or in parking meters. Some people have seen a face on one of the mountains on Mars. Samantha closed her eyes and tried to push the horrible image out of her mind. She took a few deep breaths and then slowly opened her eyes again. The face was still there. It was looking at her, studying her, holding her in its sights. You're right, she lied, afraid her dad would think she was crazy. It was just my imagination. Samantha stayed close to her father as they both went downstairs to the kitchen. She said nothing more about the face all during dinner and remained silent on the topic when they later watched a movie on cable TV. But that night, when she went to bed, Samantha knew she was being watched. She tossed and turned in bed, trying to get comfortable, but she was constantly aware of another presence in her bedroom. Finally, she turned over and looked up at the plywood board that covered her window. At first, the board appeared to her as nothing more than a large black rectangle. But then, as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, details became clearer. Just as before, she could make out the distinct shapes of eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Even more disturbing, these features seemed to be glowing from within. It was as if they were trying to burn their way out of the wood and into the world beyond. Samantha's world. Her heart beating wildly, Samantha turned away and buried her face in her pillow. It's just my imagination, she said to herself. There's no face in the wood. My mind is playing tricks on me. After a few minutes, Samantha was finally able to relax. But even as she drifted off to sleep, she remained convinced that here, in her bedroom, she was not alone. Anne Besh was what many people might call Gothic. She preferred to dress mostly in black. Her hair, which was naturally medium brown, had been dyed the color of asphalt. When her mother allowed her to wear makeup, it was always very, very dark. Like so many of the kids who were into the Gothic movement, Anne was very much into ghosts, ancient spells, graveyards, and anything else that suggested the supernatural. Anne had long known about Samantha Collier's propensity for seeing faces where they shouldn't exist, which is why, even though they came from very different backgrounds, the two had long been best friends. Spooky, Anne said after Samantha told her about the glowing face in the plywood board. That is like, so totally cool. I'm scared, Anne, Samantha confessed. It was lunch period, and they were sitting off by themselves in a far corner of the school cafeteria. I know I'm just seeing things, but I can't shake the feeling that something is really there. Maybe it is, Anne said, raising a darkly shaded eyebrow. You've heard of the Druids, haven't you? I think so, Samantha replied. Didn't they build Stonehenge or something? Exactly, Anne said. They were the ancient inhabitants of England. They worshipped nature, the earth, the sky, the seasons. They believed that the life force was everywhere, even in the rocks. And they believed that spirits, intelligent spirits, lived in trees. That's why we still knock on wood to ward off bad luck. So what are you saying? Samantha asked nervously. I'm saying that there really could be something in that board, Anne stated. It could contain an ancient spirit, one that's fighting to get out. Do you think it's a good spirit or a bad spirit? Samantha asked. Ah, now that's the final Jeopardy question, isn't it? Anne said slyly. What do you think? More importantly, what do you feel? Samantha didn't have to search her soul very deeply for an answer for that one. She knew exactly how she felt. She felt afraid. Very afraid. Who did this? Samantha demanded. Who did this to my room? She was standing in her bedroom doorway, surveying a scene that could only be described as total chaos. It looked like a tornado had swept through her room, dumping all of her books and papers on the floor, ripping apart her nearly made bed, and knocking the pictures on her wall askew. The plywood that normally covered the hole in her window was now lying crookedly against the wall, allowing a strong, cool breeze to blow in through the shattered glass. "Oh my," her mother gasped as she joined her daughter in the bedroom doorway. "This must have happened while I was at the hospital doing my volunteer work." She walked over to the plywood board, picked it up, and placed it back over the shattered window. "I guess the board must have come loose, and the wind did this. You know we had that big wind blow through around noontime." "No wind could have done this," Samantha insisted. "Then what did?" her mother asked. "You think a burglar broke in, messed up your room, and then left without taking anything or touching anything else in the house?" "No," Samantha said, but left it at that. She was too scared to tell her mother what she really thought. Scared that her mother would think she was being a paranoid fool. Scared to admit the obvious, even to herself. She spent the rest of the day cleaning up the mess in her room, then collapsed, exhausted in her bed around 9:30 that night. Almost immediately, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she instinctively felt another presence in the room. Then she heard breathing. Heavy breathing. There was no longer any doubt. Something was in the room. Alarmed, Samantha bolted up in bed and looked around. She appeared to be alone. Then she looked over at the plywood board. The face was back, even more distinct than ever, and its eyes seemed to be twitching. "It's just my imagination," Samantha said to herself in an almost ritual-like mantra. "It's just my imagination. It's just my imagination." Slowly, she rose off the bed. Her right hand extended and carefully approached the board. Foot by foot, inch by inch, she drew closer and closer to the strange, glowing face that seemed to be staring back at her from within the swirls of the wood's grain. As her fingertips neared the strange glowing image, snap! The mouth literally jumped out of the wood and made a grab for her fingers. Samantha immediately yanked back her hand and gasped. As Samantha backed away, continuing to watch in horror, the creature within the wood board slowly pulled its massive form out from the wood in which it had been imprisoned. First, the head came free, its skull the size of a lion's, but with a huge forward-jutting jaw. Then, its two front paws slammed down on the carpet, each foot armed with 5 thick, razor-like claws. Oddly, although the beast's form appeared alive and supple, it still retained the look and texture of wood. Samantha could see the lines of grain in its skin along with the swirl of knotholes and the wave-like patterns of the striations. She knew there was no time to call the police. There was not even enough time to get her parents. If this beast was going to be stopped, she would have to do it herself, and do it now. But how? The answer came to her in a flash. As the monster continued to squeeze its way into the room, Samantha turned and, slamming the bedroom door behind her, bolted down the stairs to the first door. She flung open the patio doors and ran over to the backyard barbecue. She grabbed a can of lighter fluid in one hand and a butane-powered charcoal lighter in the other. Returning to her bedroom, she could hear something roaring, howling on the far side of the door, but there was no sound of movement. Perhaps the creature had not yet totally freed itself from its wooden prison. Screwing up her courage, Samantha turned the knob, then kicked open the door. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw, less than 10 feet away, the form of a huge, cat-like beast, now almost fully formed. Not allowing herself to consider the danger before her, Samantha entered the bedroom and immediately let loose a stream of lighter fluid in the beast's direction. The animal snarled and spat as its face became drenched with the strong gasoline-like liquid and the substance soaking quickly into its pores. The can thunked hollowly in Samantha's hand, and she realized it was now empty. She clicked the trigger on the butane-powered lighter. No flame. She clicked it again. Nothing. Could it be out of fuel? Gripping the instrument with both hands, she gave it one last, desperate pull. Click! She was rewarded with a glorious, bright orange flame. "Take this!" she shouted and hurled the wand at the wooden beast. Whoosh! There was an explosive blast of air as the monster's body burst into flames. Samantha ran back into the hall, slamming the door behind her. There was an explosive bang as the creature hurled itself against the door, but the door held firm. This time. "Samantha, what's going on?" Samantha turned to see her mom and dad standing in their bedroom doorway, looking dazed and confused. "It's a fire!" Samantha cried. "We have to get out of the house! Now!" At that same moment, the beast howled and again threw itself against her closed bedroom door. To her parents, it must have sounded like a blast of wind bursting through her window to feed the raging inferno, but she knew the true source of the noise and knew there wasn't much time left. "Move!" she cried and grabbed her parents by the hand. Too confused to resist, they followed their daughter down the stairs and outside into the damp night air. Just before leaving the house, Samantha turned and saw what appeared to be a giant cat, its body in flames, bounding down the stairs after them. She immediately leapt onto the porch and slammed the door, trapping the burning beast inside the home. "Oh no!" Samantha's mother cried. She was standing on the front walk looking back at their house. Flames were pouring from Samantha's bedroom window. More flames appeared behind the living room window on the home's first floor as the fire from the burning monster spread quickly to the carpet, drapes, and furniture. "We're going to lose the house!" "Better the house than our lives," Samantha said, more to herself than anyone else, as, boom! The monster made one last effort to blast its way to freedom. Fairhaven Mental Hospital turned out to be far more pleasant than the stories that had floated around Samantha's hometown had led her to believe. The rooms were small but sunny. The doctors and nurses were all extremely pleasant, and the food, although not exactly delicious, was edible. Samantha continued to wonder if it was smart telling the police the truth about what had happened in her bedroom that awful night. She could have lied and said she'd just knocked over a candle and that the fire was an accident, but she felt the world needed to know that, contrary to what parents always tell their children, there are monsters in the world. Of course, the police didn't believe her, so here she was spending day after day in her pajamas, attending countless therapy sessions as the doctors tried to cure her of an illness that she didn't even have. Yes, it was frustrating, but at least she was safe. Allowing her mind to wander, Samantha settled back onto her pillow and stared up at the popcorn-style ceiling directly over her head. The room's low lighting caused the rough textured material to create a complex pattern of tiny shadows. Although these shadows at first looked like nothing in particular, as Samantha continued to stare at them, something more familiar began to take shape. Something unsettling. Something frightening. Something that would give Samantha Collier nightmares for the rest of her days. It was a face. These are odd. I love them, but these are oddball, man. These are really strange. For those of you with us who haven't been with us the weeks prior, this book is extra strange, and I am enjoying it a lot, a whole lot. So let's see what is going on in the chat room. The faces! All right. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to Keith Tomlin for your generous tip. He said in the comments, he said, "Keep the change, you filthy animal." Shane Migliavaca, I also want to thank you so much for your generous tip. I really do appreciate it. And please, guys, if you're looking for something a little less family-friendly and very scary, go to weeklyspooky.com and listen to my Weekly Scary Story podcast. The most recent episode is one of Shane's very own stories, and it is very, very good. So let's see what you guys are saying. The chat is being a little bit funny, so I apologize if I miss some of your comments. It's only showing me so far back, and I'm trying my best. So let's see what is going on. Here we go. Oh, and Ray Cersei, thank you so much for the tip via Venmo. She said, these are so bad, but so good. All right, and Samantha's parents had her committed the next day. Jeff Berkman, you were not far off, Jeff. Whoa, what the heck? They put her in a mental hospital? That was what Ray Cersei said. Shane Migliavacca said, Samantha has a lot of explaining to do. Jeff Berkman said, hi, nailed it. Ray Cersei said, the faces. Mark Shields said, weird as heck. Oh, by the way, Mark, I just got a notification when the stream started. Your t-shirts finally shipped. I'm sorry they took almost 3 weeks, but the printers are backed up because of some global pandemic thing. But your t-shirts are on the way. I would not be surprised if you got them by maybe Saturday or Monday. Thank you for ordering your very own Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories t-shirt, by the way. Michelle Antisocial said, burn it down, Samantha. Burn it all down. Morgan Murr said, best one of the night so far. I did like that one quite a bit. David Denoyer said, ha, he said a whole lot. You're great dishonor, David. Tony Janot said, I like that one. Mark Shields, oh yeah, it said yes, because he's responding to the t-shirt thing. Unfortunately, the chat is not letting me look as far back as I would like, so I'm sorry if I missed some of your comments during the story. I'll try to keep up. Maybe I can use the computer. That might let me see a few more. Oh, yeah, here we go. Let's see some other comments you guys said, because we got a whole bunch of them. You guys were having a great time in the chat. Oh, and thank you. Ray Cersei said, this helps my week perk up. Thank you so much. It perks my week up, too. It really does. Shane Migliavacca said, crash, what a way to start. Right? I hope that scared some of you guys when I made the scream sound really suddenly. Dad killed those kids, I'm calling it. Haha. Cannibals. David, I think you were wrong on that one. Ray Cersei, charcoal sounds like my dad. I think everybody's dad is a charcoal man. On the wood, oh gosh, barbecue chicken. I guess everybody was really running with this cannibal subtext. Oh, the wood is staring at her. That's what you get for using cheap pine. That's what Keith Tomlin said. Ray Cersei doing a heckin' a woo good pupper. Yeah, Henwolf got really barky about me yelling, calling for a dad. Michelle Antisocial said, seeing faces means your brain works good. Yeah, but it depends on what the faces want to do to you. Jeff Berkman said, Samantha has a hidden stash of salvia, doesn't she? Keith Tomlin said, pareidolia, tendency for incorrect perception of a stimulus as an object, pattern, or meaning known to the observer, such as seeing shapes in clouds, seeing faces in inanimate objects, or abstract patterns, or hearing hidden messages in music. Groovy. Shane Migliavacca said, mutant teenage radioactive cats in the walls. Shane Migliavacca, goth girl makes any story better. I knew you would think so, Shane. I've read enough of your writing to know that you are all about the goth girl character, especially a 1990s style goth girl. Ray Cersei, the wood tore your room apart. Tony Janot, how many people are looking around their room for faces now? I know I am. Jasmine said, hi, it's normal watching a YouTube video. Nope. Keith Tomlin, am I the only one imagining a Gary Busey face? Oh, it's Norma Jean. Oh, hey, Norma Jean. Thank you for tuning in. Ray Cersei, roar, mad kitty. Shane Migliavacca said, I could only picture these creatures in poor 1999 CGI. That's funny. Man, you guys were having a field day with the comments. Morgan Moore was not expecting a wooden cat creature. Curious to see how she explains why she set her room on fire. And then we found out exactly what happened. David Denoyer just said, excuses, excuses. Morgan Moore said, it gave me problems to when I was first trying to join the stream at 8. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Morgan. Well, you didn't miss too much. Samantha is a Seth Rollins fan. Oh, wrestling reference. Jeff Berkman, the stream is getting bad. Have fun all. Sorry, man. I hope the stream is going okay. I haven't heard anything else from anybody saying the stream has dropped. So hopefully we're doing okay. Oh, my mom, Karen Turner Weemet, just said, hi, son. Hi, Mom. How are you? I'm reading scary stories that I used to read when I was a little kid. Although I don't think you ever bought me any of these books when I was a kid, because I don't think I knew that they existed. So that was a pretty good bunch of comments you guys had there. I enjoyed them quite a bit. And thank you again, guys, for the generous tips. The tips via PayPal and Venmo, they are not required, but they are appreciated, as is hitting the share button to help other people join us. And I've got a very special treat. Oh, my mom sent a heart. Thank you, Mama. I hope you're doing well. And Mom, you should hang out. Or at least listen to one story. It only takes about 20 minutes. You might enjoy it. I'm pretty okay, reader. Michelle said the stream is okay. That's good to know. My voice is getting a little tired, but luckily I scored some excellent chloroseptic spray, and this stuff numbs everything. And it just punches you in the throat. So, what say we hit another story from our Scary Stories for Sleepovers, number 9, that I got on the internet from some Goodwill store in Indiana. Let's see what the next story is. Ooh. This is the weirdest book in the series, and I am thrilled to be reading it. This story, my friends, is called Scratcher. It was hot when Kent Newcomb awoke from a deep sleep. Real hot. His pajamas were soaked with sweat, and his pillow was uncomfortably moist from perspiration. This was not a surprise. It had been blistering hot all week. Afternoon temperatures had hovered around 100 degrees, and even at night, the lows had failed to get below 75. The high humidity had made going outside feel like stepping into a steam bath. As for sleeping, well, lying on a bed of nails would have probably been more comfortable. Why is it that you always feel hotter at night? Kent wondered as he kicked off his damp cotton sheet. His blankets had long ago been banished to the floor. I wish Dad would turn up the air conditioning. It's like an oven in here. Kent turned his pillow over and tried to get comfortable. That's when he heard the noise. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It seemed to be coming from directly under his bed, yet at the same time seemed far, far away. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded like a dog or cat was trying to claw its way through a door. But the Newcomb family didn't own any dogs or cats. In fact, the closest thing to a pet Kent had ever had was a box turtle he'd gotten for his 7th birthday, but it had long ago gone on up to the great terrarium in the sky. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Kent sat upright nervously. A wave of dizziness swept over him, but it quickly passed. Knowing he could never sleep with that scratching going on, he got up, determined to find the source of the sound. At his bedroom door, he paused and listened. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Whatever was out there, it was definitely an animal. But what kind? Maybe it was a squirrel that had somehow gotten itself trapped between the house's walls and was desperately trying to dig its way out. Or maybe it was a rat with pink, glowing eyes, a long, hairless tail, and fangs that were just itching to tear into human flesh. Kent shivered, involuntarily, but resolved to press onward. He opened the door, ventured into the dark hallway, then paused at the top of the stairs. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was definitely coming from downstairs. His mouth suddenly as dry as sandpaper, Kent grabbed a hold of the wooden banister and began making his way step by step down to the first floor. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound seemed to be coming from every direction at once. As he stopped to focus his mind, he realized that the scratching was coming from the far side of the breezeway door just off of the kitchen. Beyond the breezeway was the home's laundry room, and beyond one more door, the 2-car garage. Now things were starting to make some sense. Some kind of small animal must have found its way into the garage during the night, perhaps through an air vent or a crack in the wall that had otherwise gone unnoticed. It might have even scampered in when Dad had drove his car in from work. Lost and unable to find its way out, the animal was now trying to free itself the best way it knew how, by digging through the house itself. But what kind of animal? Scratch, scratch, scratch. As Kent approached the breezeway door, he could feel rivulets of sweat run down his face. But it wasn't the heat that was making him sweat this time. No, the 13-year-old was scared. Some kind of wild creature was crouching in the darkness just a few feet away from where he was standing. Maybe it had rabies or some other dreaded disease. The last thing the boy wanted to do was open the door and let the creature come running into his house. But how could he make it go away? Scratch, scratch, scratch. His hand shaking, Kent reached for the light switch on the wall next to the breezeway. He flicked it on and immediately saw a bar of light glowing through the crack between the door and the floor below. Instantly, the scratching stopped and, for a brief moment, Kent thought he heard the sound of tiny feet clicking their way across the breezeway's linoleum tile. He stood there, barely breathing, for, well, he wasn't sure how long. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably closer to 5 minutes, Kent turned and slowly returned to the stairs. He made sure to keep the breezeway light on to keep the squirrel or rabbit or rat or whatever it was from returning. 10 minutes later, Kent was back in his bed, slowly drifting back to sleep. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Kent's eyes snapped open like they were spring-loaded. He sighed with frustration. Something told him it was going to be a long night. "Yeah, it was some kind of animal, all right," said Kent's father, as his son examined the inner face of the breezeway door the next morning. "Maybe there's a possum in the garage, or even a raccoon." Mr. Newcomb bent down to take a closer look at the door. The bottom right-hand corner was clearly marred by numerous scratch marks. In addition, the breezeway's tile floor was littered with wood shavings. The inner door, the one that led to the garage, stood slightly ajar. They must have forgotten to close this inner door the night before, and that's how the animal had gotten into the breezeway. "Do you think it's still here?" Kent asked fearfully, turning toward the garage. He could just imagine some wild raccoon lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce on them at any moment. "Hard to say," his dad replied. He opened the inner door all the way, reached through the doorway, and flicked on the garage light. Joining his father, the first thing that struck Kent was the stench. It smelled like rotten eggs, week old fish, and really smelly cheese all mixed together in a big vat of sun-dried cat's guts. Looking over to the garage's right-hand wall, he immediately saw the source of the awful smell. All 3 of the family's large plastic garbage cans were overflowing with trash. In addition, 4 large plastic bags, each bulging with more garbage, were piled near the garage door. Kent remembered that their city's trash collectors had been on strike for the past 2 weeks, halting all garbage pickup in the area. As a result, refuse was piling up all over town, including in the Newcombs' garage. The aging trash and the recent record heat had combined to create an odor that was more repulsive than anything Kent could ever remember smelling. "No wonder we've started to attract wild animals," he thought. "What self-respecting scavenger could resist a stench like this?" The next thing Kent noticed was the entire garage was strewn with stray bits of trash. Garbage was on the floor, on the cars, even in the storage shelves. It looked as if a wild monkey had rampaged through the garage, throwing trash in all directions. Clearly, whatever their unwelcome visitor was, it was capable of doing significant damage to the Newcombs' garage and everything inside. Kent's father pushed the button that activated the automatic garage door opener. Moments later, the garage was flooded with bright morning light. "Oh no!" Kent's father cried as he stumbled over to his car, a late-model German-made luxury sedan. "Look what that thing did!" Kent saw that his father was pointing to several large scratches on the driver's side of the car. "What do you think it was?" Kent asked. "I can't think of any animal that can make scratch marks like that," his dad replied, "except maybe a bobcat or a cougar, and those don't live around here." "Do you think it's still here?" Kent wondered aloud, looking about nervously. "It better not be," his father snarled, "or I'll kill it with my bare hands." Kent looked about, searching for signs of movement, but all he saw was garbage. Garbage everywhere. "It's probably gone," he thought. "It must have gone out the same way it came in." Still, as his eyes surveyed the overflowing garbage cans and studied the shadows beyond them, he couldn't help but get the uneasy feeling that he was being watched. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Kent's eyes snapped open and he looked over at his digital alarm clock. It was just after 2 in the morning, and their nightly visitor had returned. Feeling his heart pounding in his chest, Kent squeezed his eyes closed, pulled his pillow down over his ears, and tried to block out the noise. But no matter how hard he tried, all he could hear was scratch, scratch, scratch. We've got to get that thing out of the garage, he thought with alarm. We have to get it out before it gets us. Running on pure adrenaline, Kent threw back his sheet and stormed out into the hallway. 10 seconds later, he was back at the breezeway entrance. The night before, they'd made certain to close the breezeway's inner door, which meant the animal was now trapped in the garage itself. Kent pounded his fist on the outer door, hoping to scare it off. "Go away!" he shouted. "Go back outside! There's nothing for you in here! Leave us alone!" "Hey, what's going on down there?" he heard a voice demand. Startled, Ken spun around to see his father leaning over the stairway railing. "That animal's back," Kent replied. "It woke me up. I was trying to scare it away." "Well, you woke me up," his father responded. "Your mother, too. We thought someone was breaking into the house." "Well, if you think about it, someone or something is," Kent noted. Kent's father came the rest of the way down the stairs, then joined his son at the breezeway door. "What are you going on about? What are you going to do?" Kent asked nervously. "Open the door?" "Shh," his dad replied, then put his ear to the door. Kent held his breath as his father listened for sounds of movement in the garage. After about 30 seconds, his dad turned away from the door and toward Kent. "Whatever it is, it's gone now," Kent's father said with a sigh. "Let's go back upstairs." "But what about the animal?" Kent inquired. "I bet it's still in the garage." "First thing tomorrow, I'm buying a trap," said his dad. "Then hopefully we can all get a good night's sleep." The trap was about the size of a small microwave oven and was made entirely of wire mesh. Kent watched fascinated as his father demonstrated how the contraption worked. "You put a piece of food like this old piece of salami here at one end of the trap," Kent's dad explained, laying the cold cut inside the device. "Then, when the animal walks in, it trips this little bar and, clink, the open end of the trap slammed shut." "And it can't get out?" Kent asked. "Not unless it can reach through the cage and flick this switch," his dad said as he pushed the little metal bar that opened the cage door. He then set the cage down in the garage in front of the breezeway entrance and set its door into the open position. "If our little friend shows up tonight, he's going to be very, very surprised." "I hope so," said Kent as he gazed at the metal apparatus. Then a disturbing thought crossed his mind. "I just hope that cage is big enough. Would a cougar or a bobcat fit in there?" "I told you, wild cats don't live around here," his father insisted. "It has to be something small, like a possum or a raccoon. Don't worry, this cage should be plenty big." Kent's nose crinkled as he got another whiff of the stomach-turning stench coming from the trash cans. He wondered how even a wild animal could live in a place like this. No wonder it's trying to get out, Kent thought. If I was trapped in a place that smelled like this, I'd do anything to find my way out, too. "You open the door," Kent said, as his father... "You open the door?" Kent said as he and his father stood in the breezeway the following morning. His mother stood anxiously by the kitchen entrance about 20 feet away. "If you did trap an animal, you better not let it in this house," she said insistently. "Don't worry, dear, it's not going anywhere," Kent's dad assured her. "I'll take it out to the woods and release it there." "Well, let's see what we've got," Kent said eagerly. He watched his dad open the door to the garage, then snap on the light. Kent couldn't believe the sight that greeted him. The cage's door was locked shut, clearly indicating that something had tripped it during the previous night. But there was nothing in the cage but some old chicken bones and a few other stray pieces of garbage. Whatever had entered the cage had also found a way out, as impossible as that might appear. "I don't believe it," Kent's father said as he examined the cage's door. "It's locked tight. There's no way an animal could have escaped." "Maybe it's not an animal at all," Kent suggested. Maybe it's a snake or something that could squeeze its way through the bars. Snakes don't leave scratch marks on doors, his father noted. No, whatever it was, it must have run out of the cage before the door fell shut. Then, how did all that garbage get in the cage? Asked Kent, pointing to the bits of paper, food, and other unidentifiable items that covered the cage's floor. I don't know, his dad replied. Honestly, I don't know. Together, father and son turned their eyes toward the shadowy garage beyond. Although Kent had no proof, he knew in his heart that their visitor was still with them and was probably laughing its nasty little head off. Years earlier, when Kent was in 3rd grade, he thought it would be fun to spend the night sleeping in the family minivan. Camping out, he called it. He set up a sleeping area in the back of the van, brought in a bag full of snacks, and listened to his boombox CD player for entertainment. At 9:30, his parents turned off the garage light and told him to go to sleep. He was back in the house and in his bed 15 minutes later. Kent couldn't help but think about that incident as he now sat in the van's front seat surrounded by total darkness. This time he wasn't camping out, but was staking out the garage so he could catch the creature in the act. Knowing he could never sleep through another night of that incessant scratching, he'd convinced his folks to let him spend the night in the minivan and wait for the elusive intruder to show itself. He figured that once they knew what kind of animal had invaded their garage, they'd have a better idea of how to deal with it. Initially, Kent found it difficult to relax in the van. Although he was inside the vehicle, the stench from the nearby garbage was still pungent enough to give him a headache. It was also very hot in the garage, and the lack of circulation made the atmosphere inside the van virtually stifling. But in time, his nose got used to the smell, and he grew accustomed to the temperature inside the minivan. Pushing the front passenger seat back as far as it would go, Kent was able to make himself comfortable enough so that, around midnight, he finally dropped off to sleep. Kent wasn't certain how long he'd been out, but all of a sudden, he snapped back to wakefulness. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound was coming from directly ahead of him. Something in the garage was trying to scratch its way through the closed door into the breezeway. Disoriented by the near total darkness, Kent reached over the steering wheel and fumbled around until he found the headlight controls. I got you now, he said softly, then flicked the knob at the end of the control stick. Instantly, the garage was flooded with blinding white light. A moment later, he heard an ear-piercing screech and something landed on the hood with a splat. At first, Kent thought it was a large cat that was covered head to tail in garbage. The animal's entire surface was layered with meat scraps, chicken bones, soiled cardboard, orange peels, and other assorted trash that the Newcombs had thrown out over the last 2 weeks. But when the animal leaned toward the windshield and glared at him through eyes made of slime-covered cellophane, Kent realized, to his amazement, that this animal wasn't covered with garbage. It was garbage. Somehow, the mounting pile of rotting refuse combined with unrelenting heat had caused the various organic compounds in the Newcomb's trash cans to recombine and form the living horror that now stood just inches from his face. Snarling through lips made of rotting meat, the creature used its razor-like claws, which seemed to be made out of bits of old aluminum cans, to tear at the windshield. Terrified, Kent leaned as hard as he could on the horn. Honk! Startled, the garbage creature leapt off the hood and disappeared from sight. Kent hit the horn again, then a third time. Help! He screamed, although he doubted his voice could carry from inside the minivan. Dad, help me! He hit the horn again, praying that his father would respond in time. A moment later, the light came on in the breezeway and the door opened to the garage. There stood his father, wearing his pajamas and wielding a baseball bat. It's in the garage, Kent screamed. It's some kind of garbage monster! But his father covered his eyes to shield them from the glaring headlights. Kent realized that his message was definitely not getting through the minivan's windows. Realizing he had to talk to his father directly, Kent tried to lower his window, but since the minivan's motor was not running, the power window failed to respond as he pressed the switch back and forth. Look out! He shouted. Just then, something flashed through the air and landed onto his father's chest. He heard his father scream, then fall to the floor. With no consideration for his own safety, Kent grabbed the door handle and jumped out of the minivan. Running around to the front of the vehicle, he saw the horrible garbage monster standing on his father's chest, snapping and snarling like a wildcat. Holding the baseball bat with two hands, his father was just managing to keep the creature from plunging its teeth, which were made of everything from rusty nails to old fish bones, into his throat. Searching for a weapon, Kent grabbed a garden shovel that hung from a hook on the wall. "Get off my father, you piece of trash!" Kent shouted, then swung the shovel with all his might. When the blade connected with the creature's torso, Kent heard a wet, squishy thwack, much like the sound of a 2x4 slamming into a rotting pumpkin. The creature let out an ear-piercing shriek. Garbage flew in all directions, and when the debris finally settled, Kent and his father found themselves covered from head to toe with gobs of chicken fat, vegetable shavings, and bits of trash they couldn't identify. "What was that thing?" Kent's dad said with disgust as he slowly climbed back to his feet. I think I know, but you'd never believe me," Kent replied. Then he smelled his sleeve and nearly gagged. "I think we both need to take a shower." At his father's insistence, the Newcombs called the local animal control office and reported their run-in with what Kent was now calling the trash monster. The officer who took the report, a humorless woman in her late 30s, listened to Kent describe the incident and concluded that their attacker had been a stray dog that had simply gotten itself covered with refuse. As for Kent's theory that the creature had spontaneously come to life in their trash cans, she dismissed such an idea as garbage. Kent's parents had to agree with the animal control officer. After all, monsters don't just spring to life in people's trash containers. However, Kent couldn't help but notice that, the next day, his dad ran out and bought an automatic trash compactor that sealed their garbage tight. And as he took the first of the hermetically sealed bags out to the garage, Kent also couldn't help but notice that when, just for a brief second, the package seemed to move. This book, I love this one. This one's weird. The stories aren't quite as scary, but they are wacky. These stories are out of their mind. I mean, a garbage monster. I love it. I love it. I think my friend Michelle probably loved this the most. So let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Oh, come on. People are sending me chats. I'm trying to read it. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat room. Okay, Diane said, "Hi, Henrik's mom," from Michelle's mom. David said, "Drink it." I'm guessing he's referring to the chloroseptic spray. He said, "Drink it." Thanks, Dave. Keith said, "Numbs everything. I need to get me some of that." My mom, Karen, said, "Hi, Diane. Michelle is awesome." Morgan Moore said, "So either bugs or another cat one." Boy, were you wrong. Boy, were you wrong. Diane said, "Thanks. I feel the same about Henrik." Aw, our moms are bonding. Shane Migliavacca said, "Is Duke Nukem his uncle?" I didn't want to say Newcomb. I like Newcomb instead of just saying Newcomb, which is how it was pronounced. So let's see. Better be careful, Kent. You'll end up like Samantha. Yeah, Shane, that's a good point. Keith said, "I'm sure there are some cougars around there." Mark Shields said, "Cat scratch fever." Da da da. Shane Migliavacca said, "His dad is hardcore." Diane said, "Kitty needs a scratching post ASAP." Rebecca Randolph said, "Chupacabra." Morgan Moore said, "Man bear pig maybe." Shane Migliavacca said, "It's Gary Busey." And then Mark Shields said, "Nah, it's really just Al Gore." Morgan Moore said, "The only question left then is if the kid and his dad are super serial enough to catch him." Keith Tomlin agreed, "It's Man Bear Pig." Michelle said, "It's a trash monster. Hooray, I want one." I had a feeling you would love that, Michelle. And then Morgan Moore said, "So it's Hedora." It is pretty much Hedora. Mark Shields said, "Skip Inspector, the bridge." Jason Rhymerub said, "Sorry, I'm behind on the stories because the video is lagging." I'm sorry that it's lagging for you, my man. Mark Shields said, "Okay, trash scratch fever then." All right then. Morgan Moore said, "All the puns. Oscar would be proud though." Michelle said, "So happy." Tony Giannot said, "I like that one the most so far tonight." Tony said, "That family needs to be vegetarian." Really, though. And Shane Migliavacca said, speaking from experience to Dave. So it looks like you guys had a lot of fun with that one. Your chat on that one was really fun. Let's see. No new tips. And I also want to say, I got a really nice message from Michael Rodolfi that he and his family are sitting around the campfire listening to these campfire stories. Thank you guys for hanging out. The Rodolfis are awesome. So let's see. Oof, my throat is getting a little raw. So my friends, we're getting ready to do another story. I, of course, will mention again before I spray this gross stuff into my throat. Sharing is caring, so hit that share button. Let people know what you're watching and that you're having a good time. Oh, man, that stuff works so well, though. So let people know you're having a good time listening to some scary stories. Sharing is scaring. And please, if you're able, throw me a tip. I would very much appreciate it. But we've got one more story left in this book, in Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 9. So once we finish this book, we'll be wrapping up at about 10 p.m. But once we finish this book, I'm going to open one of the packages and decide what the next book we'll read is. And we don't know what it is because I have all of the books that have come in, in the mail. I haven't opened them yet. So we'll find out together what the next book we'll be reading is. So, let's see what finale Scary Stories for Sleepovers number 9 has waiting for us. They've given us some weird stuff with ghosts and kids and trash monsters and some wild stuff. So let's see how this story ends. How this book ends. Ooh, okay. This story is called Shop Till You Drop. I gotta have it, said Casey Wrightwood. The tall 14-year-old middle schooler was pointing to a red silk blouse hanging on a rack of sports clothes marked 30% off. Her azure blue eyes blazed like twin suns, and she hungrily licked her lips as if she were gazing at the world's greatest ice cream sundae. It's a medium, she reported. You take a small. I don't care, said Casey, grabbing the blouse off the rack. Look at that color. The fabric is so soft, and best of all, it's 30% off. I'm telling you, I gotta have it. Before her friend could protest, Casey turned and raced over to the checkout counter. The cashier, who didn't look to be much older than Casey herself, read the blouse's tag with a handheld laser scanner, then announced the results. That'll be $13.80, including tax. Casey dug into her blue vinyl purse and produced 3 $5 bills. You're nuts, you know that? Said Jolene as she joined Casey at the counter. When you get home, you'll put that blouse in your closet and you'll never touch it again. I know, Casey confessed, sadly, as she watched the clerk fold her new blouse and place it into a shopping bag. But buying clothes is so much fun! She collected her change, grabbed the plastic bag printed with the store's brightly colored logo, and then headed out into the concourse of the Stratford Center shopping mall. The enclosed mall, with its brick-lined footpaths and groupings of thick ficus trees, was crowded for a Thursday afternoon. Many of the shoppers looked to be teenage girls much like Casey, no doubt picking up something new for the weekend, she thought. You know what your problem is? Jolene asked. You're a shopaholic. That's not true, Casey replied defensively, stopping in front of another junior fashion store to admire the window display. Yes, it is, her friend insisted. You buy things you don't want, don't need, and usually can't even afford just to do it. It's like shopping makes you high. A shopaholic is someone who shops compulsively, Casey corrected her. They can't help themselves. I can stop shopping whenever I want. It's just that, well, I don't want to. In fact, I would shop forever if I could. Jolene glanced at her watch. It's almost 5 o'clock, she announced. I want to get home soon. I've got math homework that's due tomorrow. All right, Casey said with a sigh, scanning the surrounding storefronts. Her eyes came to rest on the window of a small shop bearing the name Wishers. Its window was filled with numerous fashion accessories, including purses, scarves, bracelets, and various pieces of costume jewelry. A white on red banner hung over the window that declared, "Grand opening sale. Everything 25% off." "But first, let's check out that new place," Casey said. Before Jolene could protest, Casey was making a beeline for the new store. 5 minutes, Jolene insisted. No more. Wishers turned out to be everything Casey could have hoped for. Although only about 300 square feet, the tiny fashion store was crammed, wall to wall, with all kinds of kinky, colorful doodads, whatnots, and thingamajigs. With an expert eye, she quickly scanned the various rows of costume earrings, plastic bracelets, day-glow headbands, and neon-colored shoelaces. "This place is great," Casey gasped in awe. "It's all junk," Jolene said dismissively. "I know," Casey agreed, "but it's great junk." Looking about, she noticed a large bin standing in the corner. Piled within were dozens of small purses made of bright, shiny vinyl. The sign taped to the side of the bin read, "Today only, all purses, 35% off." "Oh my," said Casey, practically drooling. "Will you look at this?" She sifted through the multitude of purses that had been thrown haphazardly into the bin, then came up with one that was a dazzling ruby red. There was no other one like it in the pile. "I have got to have this purse." "You already have a purse," Jolene reminded her. "In fact, you have 10 purses." "Yeah, but I don't have this purse," Casey emphasized. She checked the price tag. It was originally $21.95. 35% off that would be $14.27. When it came to mentally computing sales prices, Casey Wrightwood was a virtual Albert Einstein. "How much do you have left?" asked Jolene. Casey checked her purse. "Only $7, she replied, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Can you loan me 10? "Hey, don't look at me," Jolene said, backing off. "I have been broke for the last week, remember? I only came here to watch you shop." "Darn," said Casey, pouting. "I really liked this purse." She opened the clasp to look inside. Immediately, her heart skipped a beat. "Look at this," she whispered. She reached inside and pulled out a fresh, crisp $10 bill. "It must be some kind of mistake," Jolene said. "This is the kind of mistake I can live with," said Casey, and immediately headed straight for the checkout counter. "What are you going to do?" Jolene asked urgently, tugging at her friend's sleeve. "I'm going to buy the purse," Casey stated. "I mean, it's finders keepers, right?" The way Casey figured it, there was no way to ever determine who the $10 really belonged to, so why not just recycle it back into the store? It wasn't like she was stealing or anything. "Well, how do I look?" Casey asked after paying for her purse. She was now standing in front of Jolene with the red vinyl purse slung over her right shoulder. "Like a girl who wants to go home," said Jolene, hopefully, looking very, very tired. "All right," said Casey, still bubbling over with energy. "I can't wait to tell the kids at school what a deal I got on this. Heck, it was practically a steal." Giggling at her own joke, Casey grabbed her shopping bags, one of which contained her old purse, and led Jolene back out into the mall. They hadn't gone more than 5 steps when Casey suddenly stopped short in front of the Street Smart Fashion boutique. "Whoa, look at that skirt," she gasped, gazing at a lemon yellow knit skirt on a mannequin display. "I gotta have it." "It's very pretty, but we don't have any more time, and you don't have any more money," Jolene reminded her. But it was too late. Casey was already heading through the shop's front door. She ran directly over to a table where several knit skirts in various solid colors, yellow, red, blue, and orange, were neatly stacked. Sorry, Henwolf is blocking the light a little. Good dog, though. Good dog. Without even looking at the size or price tag, she grabbed one of the yellow skirts and took it straight to the cashier. She was waiting anxiously for the cashier to ring up her order when Jolene joined her. "What are you doing, Casey?" Jolene asked sternly. "You know you don't have enough for that skirt." "Will that be all?" the young cashier asked. This too," Casey replied. She impulsively grabbed a pair of socks off a nearby display and set them on the counter. "You're crazy," Jolene said, nearly shrieking. "That'll be $35.71, the cashier reported. "Will that be cash or credit card?" Looking suddenly lost, Casey reached into her new vinyl purse, which of course she knew only contained $2.45 that she had left. But when she withdrew her hand, she was stunned to see she was holding two crisp $20 bills. Cash, she said with a smile and handed the money over to the cashier. What's going on here? Jolene asked, totally confused. Where did that money come from? I don't know, Casey confessed. It wasn't there before. It's like it just appeared by magic. Let me see that, Jolene demanded. Before Casey could reply, Jolene grabbed the red vinyl purse, opened its brass clasp, and looked inside. All she could see were two $1 bills and some change. This is too weird, Jolene said, letting the purse go. I know, said Casey, now grabbing hold of 3 shopping bags. But why look a gift horse in the mouth? I feel like I got a free skirt out of it. You didn't even try it on, Jolene reminded her as they headed out the door. You don't even know if it fits. Who cares? Casey said with a laugh. It was free. A weird, almost maniacal smile broke out on Casey's face. Her skin had turned deep red, and beads of sweat were glistening on her forehead. Panting heavily, the girl looked like a runner who'd just completed a mile-long foot race. Jolene was getting nervous. Casey, I think there's something wrong with you, she said in a controlled and even voice. I really think we should go home, right now. She reached for Casey's arm, but Casey pulled herself away, nearly dropping her packages in the process. No, she shouted. I have to keep shopping. I have to get as much as I can while this purse still works. What? Jolene asked in confusion. But it was too late. Casey was already stumbling toward the nearest store, which happened to sell some home electronics. Outside of her stereo and portable CD player, Casey had never had much of an interest in things electronic. But now she was practically burning with the urge to buy, and it didn't matter what it was. Within 10 minutes, she'd bought herself a new telephone with a digital answering machine, a miniature color TV, a calculator, a diver's watch guaranteed to work to a depth of 100 meters, and a non-activated cellular telephone. The cost, over $1,000. She paid with the cash that continued to pour, miraculously, from her red vinyl purse. Next was a trip to a gourmet chocolate store where she plunked down over $500 for Belgian-made truffles, bonbons, nut clusters, and chocolate-covered orange peels. At the computer software store, she paid over $700 in cash for war games, flight simulators, and arcade-style shoot-'em-ups for a home computer that she didn't even own. She next bought a leather jacket that was 3 sizes too big for her, a pair of Italian-made shoes that were 2 sizes too small, and finally, a diamond ring she couldn't possibly wear without everybody, thinking she'd stolen it. But by this point, Casey was almost unstoppable to see behind all the packages and shopping bags she was attempting to carry. She was stumbling through the mall like an overburdened camel who'd been out in the desert for a week too long. Her legs hurt, her arms ached, her feet felt like they were on fire, but Casey didn't care. She just had to keep moving. Pale and gasping for breath, she inched her way toward the nearby escalator while Jolene walked behind her, her arms folded sternly. Casey, you're scaring me, Jolene said. Gotta keep going, Casey gasped hoarsely. Can't stop. Gotta keep shopping. Can't stop now. Jolene ran ahead and attempted to block her friend's path. Casey, keep this up and you're going to kill yourself, she said. We've got to get out of here. It's like this mall has cast some kind of spell on you. Gotta keep shopping, Casey snarled, shoving Jolene aside. Several packages went tumbling in the process, but Casey didn't react. It was as if she didn't care what she had. It was the act of shopping itself that was feeding her need. Give me the purse, Jolene demanded. No, Casey replied curtly. It's the purse that's causing this, said Jolene. Give it to me and maybe you can save your sanity. No, Casey shrieked, tightening her elbow's grip on the purse's leather strap. Jolene made a grab for the red purse, but Casey turned away. Jolene grabbed for it again, and this time got her hands on its slick vinyl surface. She tried to pull it free, but Casey's grip was iron tight. It was as if Casey and her purse had become a single entity. No, 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 Casey screamed like a mother who was in the danger of losing her baby. Jolene noticed that other shoppers were staring at them and backed off. She watched sadly as Casey, her arms totally filled with packages, stumbled onto the ascending escalator. As Casey stepped aboard, she lost her balance and went crashing into the mountain of boxes and shopping bags in front of her. "Casey!" Jolene shouted, then bounded onto the moving escalator after her friend. Reaching the spot where Casey had fallen, Jolene had to literally dig through a pile of paper and cardboard until she could find her friend. She found Casey's arm buried under a department store shopping bag and grabbed her hand. "Stand up," Jolene said. "I can't," Casey said, her voice straining. "I'm stuck." Indeed, as Jolene dug deeper, she saw that part of the purse strap had wound itself around Casey's throat. But as Jolene bent down to remove it, the escalator began approaching the top of its ascent. The moving stairs contracted into one another, and one of the sharp, tooth-like ridges snagged the other end of the strap. "Help!" Casey screamed in terror as she felt the vinyl strap begin tightening around her throat. Choking for air, she grabbed the strap and pulled frantically, but it was no use. At the same time, Jolene urgently searched her pockets for something to cut, something sharp. All she could come up with was her set of house keys. "Help!" Casey croaked as she was pulled closer and closer toward the escalator's metal teeth. Without even thinking about what she was going to do next, Jolene grabbed what looked like the longest and sharpest of her keys and dug it into the hinge that connected the strap to Casey's purse. "Hang on, Casey," she shouted, her eyes nearly blinded by tears. She tried to cut the strap loose. Casey's eyes were bulging out of her head, and her tongue was starting to turn purple when... snap! The strap suddenly tore loose, freeing itself from Casey's throat. Jolene immediately grabbed her friend by the hand and pulled her up off the escalator to the landing above. A small crowd of shoppers had already gathered, apparently drawn by the irresistibly grisly sight of a 14-year-old girl being strangled to death by her own purse. Looking back, Casey and Jolene watched as the red vinyl purse crumpled and was sucked into the escalator's upper mechanism. Seconds later, the rest of Casey's packages came spilling onto the landing like luggage coming off an airline baggage chute. "I think I want to go home," Casey said softly as she slowly got to her feet. The wild look had suddenly vanished from her eyes, and the fever had gone from her cheeks. "Good idea," Jolene said, steering Casey toward the exit. "Hey, what about all your stuff?" one of the onlookers asked, pointing to the pile of shopping bags and boxes that had accumulated at the top of the escalator. "That stuff?" Casey replied with a look of confusion. "It's not mine. I've never seen it before in my life." It was nearly closing time at the Stratford Center shopping mall. Traffic at the Wisher's store had dwindled to just a handful of people. One of them was a 15-year-old high schooler, Linda Bell, picking through a bin of purses marked 35% off. She found, at the very bottom of the pile, a purse made of shiny red vinyl. It was the only purse like it in the entire store. "Looks nice," Linda said, admiring the purse's liquidy sheen. Intrigued, she clicked open its brass fastener and looked inside. Immediately, her face broke out in a broad grin, and her eyes lit up hungrily. For there, staring up at her invitingly, was a fresh, crisp, new $20 bill. That was pretty cool. I started laughing at the whole sentence about watching a 14-year-old nearly get strangled to death by her own purse. It was just a very interesting way to put it. Woo, my poor voice. Okay, let's see what we got going on in the chat. Ray Cersei said, "Yay, I'm back." Ray Cersei said, "Kinky, I did not think that word means what you think it means." Fair. Morgan Moore said, "This sounds like Spencer's." I used to work at a Spencer's Gifts. That was the last job I had. The only retail job I ever had. Shane Migliavacca said, "I was thinking the same thing." Ray Cersei said, "I feel like the purse is going to eat her. I guess shop till you drop is literal in this case." Shane Migliavacca said, "Willy Wonka owns that store, doesn't he?" Tony Janot, "Wow, this is definitely from the 90s. I think this was published in 98. Morgan Moore, "Kind of surprised she didn't buy a computer with all the games. That would make too much sense." Tony Janot, "My minimalism sense is on fire." Mark Shields, "A witch will want her purse back in the end." Tony Janot, "Her friend couldn't carry anything?" Well, that would be enabling. Keith Tomlin said, seems like an episode of Friday the 13th, the series. I agree. Ray Cersei, okay, I liked this one. Shea Migliavaca, it's a bag of holding, Dungeons and Dragons reference. Unfortunately, I never played D&D as a kid because you needed a lot of friends to do that, or at least one. All right, let me just rest the old throat a little bit, and then we'll do a little bit more. We'll do one more story from a brand new book. So let's see what the next book is going to be. We'll do one story tonight, and then next week, a week from today, we'll be reading this book. So let's see which Scary Stories for Sleepovers book this is. This one, my friends, is more Scary Stories for Sleepovers, which I believe was the second book in the entire series, written by Q.L. Pierce, who wrote the first Scary Stories book we read. More Scary Stories for Sleepovers. Because after that was even more. Then it was Super Scary Stories for Sleepovers. Then it was more Super Scary Stories for Sleepovers. Then they started numbering them. And also did Mega Scary Stories for Sleepovers. So, we'll be starting this one here in a moment. I just need a second to let my breath catch and let my throat rest. Ray Cersei, new book! Tony Janot said, I wasn't allowed to play D&D. My mom thought it was devil worship, LOL. She also wouldn't let me watch Basic Instinct. That was about it. Well, Basic Instinct might have been a bit much when you were a kid, but I don't know about D&D. So, let's see. Yeah, everything seems to be going good. Just make sure everything's working okay. Here we go. All right. We got one more for everybody tonight. Again, sharing is caring. If you have a chance, if you haven't already, just share this with some friends. Tell them to join us for one more story of the night. And if you feel like tipping, please do. PayPal and Venmo are at the bottom of the screen. I appreciate the tips very, very much. I straight up have bought groceries with them almost every single week since I started doing this. It's pretty awesome. Almost forgot the very unpleasant throat spray. This stuff does help a lot. It sprays very vigorously. All right. Hits you pretty hard. Okay. So let's read the first story from More Scary Stories for Sleepovers. All right. Ooh. This has a name in it. Colangelo. And a phone number. So these books are used. This book has, a name and a phone number written in it. Wonder what year this came out. 1992. This book was published in 1992. So let's see. Ooh, okay. This one's going to get me going because I have a thing about water. This story, my friends, is called Swimming Lessons. Loathsome water demons were the first things that Heather thought of when she saw the gray-green waves of Crocker Lake. Last evening, Heather's grandmother had told her favorite story about sea monsters that dragged people to their watery deaths simply because they could walk in the sunshine. Today, she stood on the shore of a big, mysterious lake where her parents had rented a cottage for the summer. The family, which included Heather's outgoing brother and sister, Andy and Amanda, would be staying there until school started. That was 8 long weeks away. It wasn't that Heather was anxious to get back to school. It was this place, the lake. From the moment she saw it, she was eager to leave. Heather's dislike of water was not new. She was the only one of 3 kids who couldn't swim well. When she had been very small, her mom had taken her to the local pool for lessons. One afternoon, when she was running to join the class, she had slipped at the edge of the pool and flown headlong into the water. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and she had sucked in a huge mouthful of water before she surfaced. Choking and gasping, she had clung to the edge of the pool until the teacher helped her out. Since then, she didn't feel comfortable in the water and managed to avoid swimming most of the time. Andy and Amanda, on the other hand, loved it. Andy was on the junior swim team at school, and last summer they both had taken junior life-saving courses at the Y. Nobody, except Heather, ever thought about wicked sea monsters waiting under the water for unsuspecting victims. Each day at the summer cottage, the three kids walked about a mile down the beach to a special spot that they had discovered. Then Andy and Amanda swam out to an old raft anchored about 50 yards offshore. It was nothing more than a wide, thick wooden plank connected to two huge oil drums. Along the shore, Heather would build sandcastles, collect shells, draw, read, or sit with just her feet in the water, and watch her brother and sister. They seemed to have lots of fun pushing each other into the deep blue water and racing from one side of the raft to the other. One day, as Heather sat on the beach and watched them play a noisy game of King of the Mountain, she had the odd sensation that something was observing her. The beach was bordered by a dense stand of scrub pine. Heather turned and squinted into the dark patches between the branches. Suddenly, she felt something in the cool water touch her bare foot. Like slick, slender fingers, it drifted around her ankle. She shrieked and fell backward, yanking her foot out only to find that the monster was just a trailing water plant. She jumped up and pulled the slippery, leafy strands away. Dusting off her shorts, she turned to find her sandals and bumped right into a scruffy-looking, bearded old man. She screamed again. Now, missy," the old man soothed, adjusting a pair of wire-rimmed glasses on his nose. "There's nothing for you to fear from me." Heather felt herself trembling all over, but she didn't want to appear frightened. Why did you sneak up on me like that?" she demanded. He rubbed the stubble on his chin. "I don't rightly think I was sneaking up on anyone. I might be asking you, what are you doing on this part of the shore?" "I don't see why that is your business." "Well, actually it is. You see, I own this stretch of beach from the shoreline to the road. You can just see the roof of my house beyond those trees." Heather blushed. She realized that the old man was probably Mr. Patterson. He took care of the cottages during the winter when no one visited the lake. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I hadn't expected to see anyone. You scared me." "I don't blame you for being afraid," the man said. "There's plenty to be worried about, but not here. Out there." He pointed his gnarled finger toward a small island near the south shore, overgrown with bushes and towering trees. "What's the matter with it?" Heather asked. In the afternoon sun, the island looked harmless enough. "Depends on who you talk to." Mr. Patterson eased himself down to sit on a large fallen log. He picked up a stick and began to draw in the damp sand. First a line to represent the shore, then a small circle to symbolize the island. Heather knelt in the sand beside him. "Oh, there's a real good reason to be careful of that place. You see, the way the tide has to squeeze in through here," he dragged the stick between the island and the shore. "It creates quite a current. At certain times of the month, it can be really treacherous." His voice took a sad tone. "There's been an awful lot of accidents out there over the years." Heather wrinkled her brow, and she said, "You mean people have died out there? Drowned?" "Oh yeah. In fact, just last summer, 4 visiting kids were drowned on the backside of the island along with the two deputies who were trying to save them. It was real strange, though," the old man mused, shaking his head. "Alice Ann Taylor, one of the deputies, grew up around here and could handle a boat and almost anything. No one ever quite figured out how the current got the best of her. Some say there's more to contend with out there than just the current. Much more. There's an old Indian legend that says that those who die in these waters never rest. They just wait and watch for others to join them." Heather felt a shiver run up her spine. She thought of the tales that her grandmother told. She could almost hear the heavily accented words. They envy those who walk in the sunshine. They drag them down to spend eternity at the bottom of the frigid water. The old man continued, but then there never seemed to be any witnesses. Last summer, only the 2 empty boats washed ashore, and they weren't talking. So it's best just to stay away from that place. Hey, Heather, Andrew called as he stood dripping on the sunny beach. Heather, come on! I have to go, Mr. Patterson, Heather said, standing and brushing the sand off her legs. Thanks for the warning. The old man frowned. See that you remember it. The following day, the family had a picnic lunch on the shore. After carrying the dishes back to the cottage, Andrew and Amanda asked if they could go for a swim. I think it's too soon after eating, their mother fretted. I'd rather you stay out of the water for a while. Instead, the 3 kids took a long walk on the beach. Picking up shells and bits of twisted driftwood, they were well out of the sight of the cottage when Andrew found an old rowboat. Hey, look at this, he said as he checked it for holes and cracks. I think it's seaworthy. Here are the oars. Andrew, Heather cautioned, Mom asked us to stay out of the water. She meant we shouldn't swim, Amanda said. I'd love to row around a bit. Maybe we could explore that little island out there. I'm sure she wouldn't mind. Come on! Andrew and Amanda started to push the small craft out into the water. Heather thought of Mr. Patterson's warning. Please don't. It isn't safe. Of course it is, Andrew countered. There's nothing wrong with the boat at all. It's not the boat, she almost shouted. Her brother and sister stopped and stared at her. It's the island, she added. Shading his eyes with one hand, Andrew glanced at the small body of land offshore. What about the island? Mr. Patterson said, Heather began. Well, he says the currents are too dangerous, but I think he was trying to warn me about something else too. He said some kids drowned out there last summer, and it was really weird. There's an Indian legend about this lake. Andrew glanced at Amanda, and a smile began to play at the corners of his mouth. Oh no, another legend. I think that crazy old man is just trying to keep everybody away because he has something to hide. Maybe it's treasure. He pushed the boat farther into the water and leapt in. Come on! What kind of treasure do you think it could be? Amanda asked as she jumped on behind him. Come on, Heather, Andrew coaxed. It'll be fun. Heather didn't budge. Tiny wavelets lapped at her ankles. I don't want to, please. We could do something else. Building a fort would be more fun. Andrew tilted his head at her. There's really nothing to be afraid of. We're all together. We won't let anything happen to you. Heather set her jaw in refusal. Okay, if that's what you want, Andrew pulled away. But we're going. You can stay here all alone if you want. Heather opened her mouth to protest, but then she had the odd feeling again that she was being watched. She didn't want to stay alone on the shore or walk back by herself. Maybe her brother was right. Maybe it would be fun and she was letting her fears prevent her from enjoying her summer. After all, she wouldn't actually be in the water. If they were all together, it would be okay. She took a deep breath and climbed into the boat. At first, Heather thought her worries were unfounded. She actually started to relax. Andrew handled the boat well, and there wasn't much of a current at all. I'll bet there's a treasure chest filled with jewels on that island, Amanda fantasized. If I were a pirate, I would have hidden my loot there. Avast, mateys, Andy sneered at his sisters. Head straight for the patch of land yonder, or you'll be walking the plank. Amanda laughed. We don't have a plank, dummy. Heather giggled too. This was really fun. Andy began to sing a song that he had thought might befit a pirate, and the girls joined in as the mainland shore dropped farther away behind them. As they approached the island, however, things began to change. Although it was early afternoon, the sunlight appeared to fade. Without warning, the wind picked up, and so did the current. Andrew fought the oars as the tiny boat was swept along. Amanda, help me! What do you want me to do? Amanda was trying to be brave, but she could hear the nervousness in her brother's voice. Take one of the oars and just try to hold the boat steady. I think if we swing around the backside of the island, we can ride it out. He aimed the bow of the boat toward the small circle of land. What can I do? Heather asked. Her brother was showing signs of tiring. Watch the shore. We have to get around that point. And if we don't want to get too close. Heather did as she was asked. When they rounded the point, she was the first to see the people standing among the tangle of vegetation that extended from the small strip of beach into the water. They seemed to be standing, not in the water, but on the surface. Whatever they were gazing directly at the children. "Andy!" she cried out. What are they?" For a moment the three sat in stunned silence. Then Andrew found his voice. "Row! Row as hard as you can!" Both Andy and Amanda heaved at the oars, scrambling to get away, but the boat edged closer to the dreadful island. As Heather watched helplessly, several of the horrid creatures slipped beneath the surface. Then, from under the water, ghastly pale hands reached up and grabbed the edge of the boat, rocking it from side to side. Amanda stood and beat at them with an oar. She was the first to plunge in. Andy reached out to grab her and toppled over the side. Heather tried to hold on, but it was no use. She felt the boat tip. She felt herself sliding into the water, the frigid grip of icy hands. Even under the water, she could see the grisly, chalk-white skin. The creature pulled her down closer and closer until she was looking into its deep green, lifeless eyes. Its long, black hair drifted around it in floating, twisting tendrils. Somehow, Heather broke free, fought her way to the surface, and gasped in a lungful of air. Screaming and kicking, she sensed herself being lifted from the water, then pulled aboard a boat by warm human hands. It was Mr. Patterson. She tried to speak, to tell him that Andrew and Amanda were still out there, but no words came. As his motorboat turned toward the mainland shore, Heather noticed that the wind had dropped. There was no current, and the island was completely deserted. She felt as if she were in a dream. Mr. Patterson took her to his cabin and wrapped her in a warm blanket. "I'm so sorry," he said as he handed her a cup of hot tea. "I saw the three of you rowing out, and I tried to get to you as quickly as I could, but the motor on the boat, I couldn't get it started. These old hands are so clumsy." Heather looked at his hands, the same hands that had pulled her from the water. "Did you see them? Your brother and sister?" "No, I was too late." Heather looked into his eyes. "Did you see them?" The old man sighed. "I didn't see much of anything once I came around the point. Like an old fool, I was in such a hurry. I was trying to do too many things at once. My glasses, well, they slipped into the water. I couldn't see much of anything. Still can't. Everything up close is pretty blurry. I was lucky I found you." They sat without speaking for a moment until a harsh buzzer broke the silence. Heather jumped. "That's the deputy," Mr. Patterson reassured her. "I called the sheriff's department. I'm afraid I can't see well enough to drive you home, and it's beginning to get dark. After what you've been through, I don't think we should walk. They've already called your parents." He adjusted the blanket around Heather's shoulders, and they stepped outside into the twilight. The female deputy slipped her arm around the girl. "You've had a terrible shock," she said. "You're all right now." Still stunned by all that had happened, Heather didn't even look up. Mr. Peterson squinted at the deputy in the gathering darkness. "Her folks are over at the Ames place. You'll be sure she gets there safe and sound. Poor little thing. I wish I could take her there myself, but..." "Don't worry," the woman assured him. "You've done all you can. I'll see that she joins her family right away." Nodding his head, Mr. Patterson patted Heather once more on the shoulder and turned back for his cabin. Heather let herself be guided down the lane towards the place where the deputy said her car was parked. After a moment, she became aware that they were moving past the dirt road and on toward the lake. "Where are we going?" she demanded. "This isn't the right way." As she twisted away, the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Heather felt the deputy's icy hand. Looking up, she saw that the woman's long dark hair was wet. In the moonlight, she could see the horrible green eyes and a tarnished name badge on the uniform that read, Taylor. With her last reserve of strength, Heather bolted away, running until her heart felt like it would burst. She didn't realize that she was still heading for the lake until she slammed against something cold and damp and fell to her knees. "Where are you going, little sister?" "Andy! Amanda!" Heather cried out in relief. "Thank goodness! I thought it was so horrible. I thought you both had drowned." She gazed up happily at her brother and sister as they leaned toward her in gloom. "How did you—" Her relief seeped away and was replaced with mounting terror as she realized that Andrew and Amanda, dripping wet, were staring down at her with lifeless green eyes. "No! No!" Heather wailed, trying to shrink away from them. Grinning, her brother wrapped his clammy arms around her as her sister said, "Come on, Heather. It's such a nice night for a swim." Oh, man! I got goosebumps like super bad. I did like the number 9 scary story book. I thought it was interesting. It had a lot of wild stories, but oh man, that reminds me, because the earlier books we read, they were friggin' scary. I thought that was scary because I am a big man-child loser. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in here. Tony Janot said someone has to make his spraying in the mouth a gif. Keith Tomlin said call the number. Well, it doesn't have an area code, Keith, so that's why I can't call it. No area code. That's how old school it is. Tony Janot said I was 12 in 1992. How old was I in 1992? 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92. I was like 7 or 6 years old. Shimiliavaka, call it. Tony Janot. Yes, a lake story with a cottage. I love those kinds of scary stories. Me too. I am terrified of water. I learned how to swim when I was 30. Let's see. Shane Migliavacca said, it's got a death curse. Aquatic Jason Voorhees. Jasmine Rodolfi said, Norma Jean loves your stories. She made it an hour and a half. Wow, thank you. I'm so glad she enjoyed it. Tony Janot, the old man has a Horcrux out there. I enjoyed the old man voice you were making. I do enjoy doing old man voices. I tried to make him, I don't know, I didn't know if he was going to turn out to be a good guy or a bad guy, so I tried to make him kind of, I don't know, like you could kind of identify with him and think maybe he was all right, because I didn't know, if I was going to have to swerve you guys or not. Tony Janot said, I changed my mind. That's my favorite one of the night. Mark Shields said, back to the kids dying stories. Yes, we are back. Keith Thomas said, you should be at least a little ashamed. Mark Shields said, best of the night. I agree. That was definitely my favorite of the night. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with me while we tell some stories. So next week, same time, 8 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday, we'll be reading more scary stories to tell in the dark. And we'll be giving ourselves some spookies and having a good time. So I want to thank everybody so much for hanging out with me tonight, for hanging out with me, almost every week when you're able. I want to thank you guys so much for buying t-shirts. I want to thank you guys so much for giving tips. They really make me, they make my life a lot easier, and they make me very happy. It really means a lot to me. But most of all, it means a lot to me to have somewhere to be every week hanging out with you guys, because, like my state is, attempting a slow reopen, but a lot of places aren't reopening. And, things aren't really getting back to normal. And I want to hang out with you guys and have a good time and share some scary stories. And no matter how late summer makes the sun go down, it is always a spooky, chilly night at Uncle Henny's Campfire Stories. So, until next time, you guys, thank you again so much. Let's see, you guys said something else. Craig Cohen said, thank you so much, Henrik. No, thank you, Craig. Tony Janot said, thank you for another amazing, fun Wednesday night, bro. Love you. Love you too, my man. Thank you all again. Good night. Take care of yourselves and stay spooky. See you next time.